Hey everyone, it's Bob. Welcome back to the show. My distinguished guest today is Lance Thompson, president of the newly rebranded VIVI, a company redefining how AI is used to enhance hospitality experiences. Lance brings a deep background in luxury hospitality, having opened and operated world-class properties with brands like Four Seasons, Vail Resorts, and Aspen Hospitality. It was a text message from a longtime guest and friend, now a tech entrepreneur, that unexpectedly pulled Lance into the world of AI. What started as a casual demo of a multilingual voice assistant quickly became the foundation for what is now VIVI, a suite of conversational AI tools built to serve people, not replace them. Lance and I talk about how voice AI can deliver the kind of high-touch, always-on service hospitality has long promised without relying on outdated decision trees or impersonal automation. He shares how VIVI tools are helping frontline teams deliver faster, more accurate, and more human interactions, even in 20-plus languages. Whether it's supporting HR, room service, or golf operations, Lance is building for consistency, trust, and delight, one natural conversation at a time. Thanks for tuning in. I know you will enjoy this conversation. Hey everyone, it's Bob Pulver. Welcome back to Elevate Your AIQ. Today I have the pleasure to speak to Mr. Lance Thompson. How you doing today, Lance?
Doing great. It's a beautiful day in Boulder, Colorado.
Yeah, I bet. Just hoping for a lot more snow out there as I head west this weekend.
Well, yeah, I know you're headed to Park City. It'll be beautiful there. I can't guarantee great snow, but it'll come soon. I promise.
Yeah, fingers crossed. So, Lance, there's a whole bunch of things that I want to dig into. You've done a lot of really interesting work in your career, so I definitely want to dig into that. Why don't we just start with that, with you just talking a little bit about your background and the work that you're doing at SAVI.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Carmel, California, which is a small resort community, and knew early on I wanted to be in hospitality. I think I was pretty fortunate to know just from my first time ever caddying for a guest and feeling like I loved being in a space that I could help people have a better experience in life, have a better vacation, and loved the ability to impact that early on. So knew that's what I wanted to do. I was lucky enough to go to University of Nevada, Las Vegas and study hospitality there. Worked with Four Seasons right out of school in beautiful Santa Barbara, and then came back to my hometown of Carmel and opened Bernardus Lodge, first opening that I was able to be a part of. And that time there weren't many opportunities to be part of an opening, and thought this is my one chance to do it, and quickly moved to Vail Resorts and was part of opening 6 resorts with them. So opening became a big part of what I did early on, and was able to move around to some beautiful places with Auberge and opened properties like Esperanza and Cabo San Lucas, and spent a year and a half living there. Worked with them opening up Palmetto Bluff in South Carolina and Cordoval, and some beautiful places up in Napa as well. And yeah, just really have been in this industry my entire career. I spent 25 years delivering excellent service through luxury hospitality. Moved into some higher leadership level roles as my career progressed, and found myself in Colorado 15 years ago, working with a company called Timbers Resorts, and opened properties in Steamboat and Vail and beyond, but living out of the Aspen area. And really fell in love with Colorado. My first son was born in Steamboat, second son born in Vail, and moved down to Boulder just about a decade ago.
Wow. So you've really been in some amazing vacation kind of places in the US. The experiences that you had, delivering those amazing, services to guests who probably had pretty high bar as far as, excellent customer service. So I'm sure that influenced, how you sort of upped your game, and, some of the things that I'm sure you carried you into where you are now at the intersection of sort of hospitality and technology.
Yeah, it really did. I think it's interesting. There was a point in my career, actually the move to Boulder was driven by an opportunity to work with Vail Resorts. At the time, I'd never worked for a large publicly traded company. I'd spent time in the corporate office, so to speak, but it was usually 10 to 20 of us in a small office somewhere with a lot of travel out to properties. But first time working in a 10-story building up on the 10th floor with about 1,500 people in a corporate office, and working with people from very much outside of the industry. One of the things that was really special about the experience with Vail and the connection to the alumni from Vail was really working with people that had come from all walks of life. People they'd be an executive with a company based in New York, but moved here to work with Vail because it was a large company, not because it was in the ski industry, not because it was in the hospitality side. So exposed to a lot of different disciplines, exposed to some of the technology. At Vail Resorts, I was given the opportunity to oversee reservations, which was taking We ended up transitioning call centers to all remote-based agents and looking at the technology to make that happen. So it's really when I started focusing a little bit more on the technology side and how it could impact the guest experience. And I think that at that point, started to see this intersection where there was some machine learning started to come into play. Areas like accounting and legal, and some of the companies that I was working with were starting to use some of these tools, but I hadn't seen anything that was really progressing to the point of interfacing with a guest or really truly helping teams, my teams operationally, be able to execute at a better level. But I'd been searching for that, been very curious about that.
Okay. So when we talk about the sort of users of the people who are actually having these experiences, it started really more sort of back office, like employee experience, and then sort of shifted into guest experience, either on property or I don't know if that included like on mountain, in the resort itself. It sounds like on the golf side, maybe.
Yeah, I think in my time, with some of these larger companies prior to my transition to this new role, there was some interfacing that was starting to happen. And again, yes, the back of house was certainly where you started to see this happening. Accounting and legal were really the first spaces that had some quick adoption into the machine learning AI side of things, but things have really progressed very, very quickly. After working with Vail, I was lucky enough to work with Aspen Hospitality and help oversee the Little Nell brand and the Limelight brand and their growth. And with that company, started to look a little bit more intensely at the tools that were being pitched to offer automated solutions that would help the guest, and started to see a little bit more of that, but wasn't happy with some of the things that I was seeing. I saw a lot of what was really pitched as AI, but was truly decision tree, was not multilingual, called in to test some voice agents where you couldn't interrupt the agent and you'd ask a question. And if you were on the wrong path, you were listening now for a long period of time. And that's where it's the same as press 1 for reservations, press 2 for front desk. And really felt like it was a little bit of a magic trick, if you will, that really wasn't there every time I dug in more deeply. So while I was on that search for how to really try to find that path to help the guest experience more and to help the employees have some relief, I wasn't finding what I was looking for.
Yeah. And so that was the impetus to start SAVI and really dig into that on the technology side.
Yeah, it really actually a little more serendipitous than that. I'm fortunate enough, I've got a very a good friend who's a past guest who had been a serial entrepreneur and deeply involved in technology at various different stages. We actually met many years ago when I was working for Four Seasons, and one of these guests who I've just stayed in great contact with, who would text me from time to time for advice on guys' trip to Cabo, advice for family trip for skiing, and connect with different vacation rentals, stayed at properties that I've operated, and also stayed in contact with ideation around things that he was looking to invest in that could have impact in the hospitality industry. And he actually sent me a tool. He'd shared that he was bringing a team together. He'd hired someone from Microsoft to come, someone who worked for him previously, but that had spent a decade with Microsoft as their principal AI architect in the retail division. So working with some of the Fortune 100 companies, and that had been really just had a great experience with Microsoft, but was ready to branch out and lean in. And they're starting an AI company built off of some of the experimental companies they had done. They had already done a company called Market Signal AI, which is a 5-year-old now hedge fund that has 0 employees and operates autonomously. That fascinated me to hear that. They have a company called Law GPT that interfaces with legal. And then he sent me a link to a voice demo, and it was on my phone via text, and I was able to open it up and talk to it, and spoke French, spoke Spanish. Was really impressed with the knowledge that the tool had. Brought it next door to my coworker who's from China, and had him speak Mandarin to it, and he was equally as impressed. And he just said, "Is there a way that this works within hospitality, that this could help in private clubs or in golf?" And I sent back just a variety of use cases to him, saying these are ways that I see this helping. And one of the first was, wow, this could really help employees. A lot of international employees could have a big impact there. One thing led to another, and we discussed how we could pull this together, and we started the SAVI, which is the hospitality skin of the Kinetic Solutions Group tools. So it's been exciting. It's been an incredible 6 months so far. Really fun adoption, great clients that we're working with, and building some really fun tools.
Yeah, that is incredible. The stories about like the early days and some of those early examples just reminded me of some of the solutions that when I was at IBM, working with IBM Research, just some of the expert systems. It's hard for people to sort of visualize some of those expert knowledge systems, I think we call them. But if you actually visualize what those decision trees look like, it's pretty fascinating. it's less like a tree. It's more like a root structure because it's just goes so deep in so many pathways. And it's really difficult to sort of anticipate what someone might request through that type of, voice interaction. You're talking to customer service, maybe you got a junior, person and they're just kind of clueless and you get transferred back and forth, and definitely not an ideal experience for sure. And so you're right. A lot of that was sort of mislabeled. It's not that generative AI is the only AI. It's most of the public's, so first foray into AI. It's not that AI wasn't happening before, but some of that stuff was definitely a very sort of primitive, version, if you would even properly call it AI. You're right. There was some machine learning, but a lot of it is very rules based and structured, which is not really what we think of as modern AI at all.
It's not. The interaction is so different, and it's one of the first things that I share with people. I keep harping on this ability to interrupt, and I think whether you're an employee who's asking a human resources related question and you've miscategorized it and you're going down the wrong path, the ability to say no, stop, that's not what I'm asking, and to have a different feedback, and for a guest in particular, I think really really important. If it's going to interface in a way that feels real, feels connected, and can deliver a consistent experience, it has to be able to listen as well as to speak. And that was one of the key things that really impressed me about the architecture that our team here built.
I'm trying to give people like a point of reference. So like there were those solutions, and then you have a big improvement with some of the things we have in our houses now or on our devices in terms of just, hey Google, Siri, Alexa. Still pretty limited in its knowledge base, in the way that you interact with it. You can sort of interrupt, but still it's very clunky in a way. And I know Alexa's got a new version coming out with Alexa Plus. They've been, pushing on television, I'm sure, with football, playoffs coming up and Super Bowl. I'm sure there'll be more of those kinds of ads, but those are how I think about the sort of phases of the sort of generations of the maturity with some of these voice AI tools. Is that how you think about it? Is that fair?
I do. I think it's really interesting the timing for us with everything that you just mentioned right there. I would consider my family, I don't want to say early adopters of AI, but both my kids have their Alexa dots up in the room, and we have a Google Home and I think we were very happy with those initially. They thought they were very cool and they could do some fun things for us. And then now it's morphed to our work that we do, just my wife and I alone, with our interface with ChatGPT on a daily basis. We're not going to websites anymore. And this is what I hear from everyone that we interface with, is how quickly this has happened. I really think over the last really 10 to 8 months, there's been this very quick adoption and expectation that you're going to get an answer to the question you asked, not a link. Again, which is what we saw in the hospitality industry. If you went on a web chat and just couldn't get a hold of reservations, but you had questions about the property or the size of a room or something along those lines, it would just keep taking you to links or PDFs or things that you could look at or download. And that's what the user experience was a year ago for anybody that was searching for something on Google. You're typically not finding an answer. Google's quickly adopted. Obviously, if you have Gmail, you're seeing it summarize your emails at the top. I think people are finding their way to using these tools very organically right now, just because it's so in front of us. And I think it's really helped our company, Kinetic Solutions Group overall, including certainly SAVI as well. But as we sit and have these conversations in C-level executive boardroom type settings, and we're talking about our AI advisory work, or putting in a phone agent, or helping with an HR pro support tool, the speed that people go to saying, can't it just do this? At home, I can do this. Can I have this happen in legal and accounting and bank reconciliation? And the use cases pile up so quickly with how this can help companies, whether they're small, medium, or large. And I think that a lot of that willingness to raise their hand as a leader of a division and say, I think this can help us as well, and I want to try something, comes from the adoption they're seeing at home and how that's playing through. I think if everything was still the same experience that you had with maybe your Google Home a year ago before some of the upgrades with Gemini coming through, or I think that we probably wouldn't be as far along as we are.
Yeah, I see a lot of parallels in that regard in terms of what we used to refer to as the consumerization of IT or consumerization of social media and things like that. I guess it was back to the advent of social media when everyone was able to collaborate and have these online communities and social media platforms and things like that. And people were clamoring for that type of interaction and collaboration and, asynchronous communication, in the workplace as they get on some of the consumer devices. So I think we're seeing that again. We're also unfortunately seeing a lot of, shadow AI, just like we had shadow IT before that, where people are using, some of their own, devices to get answers, but, sort of a nightmare for CIOs, I suppose.
It is. It's really interesting. Yeah, I think the shadow AI. A couple things on that. One, I want to come back to the sense of community that you talked about because I think it's very relevant for some of the tools that we're building. I think that the shadow AI is something that every time we're in a conversation with anybody, whether it's general manager of a hotel or executives of a hotel company, having a policy in place on how and when and if you can use a public version of a ChatGPT or Gemini or anything else is critical. We're finding that there's but if someone was looking to find out which hotel companies had management agreements that were going to expire within the next 60 days that weren't performing well, putting that kind of search into a public LLM right now in order to poach a contract or to be a bad actor in any way or to gain a leg up. If someone from your company is taking those tools and looking for those questions or putting a profit and loss statement into a tool saying, what are the top 10 questions that my boss might ask me about my P&L from this month, with the best intentions, absolutely best intentions of trying to be smart and using technology, they're putting that information out there to help train the model, but also to be available for those that are searching. So there's some big risks around that I don't think people are totally in tune with. And whether that's going with an enterprise solution of an OpenAI or some kind of connection, or using our tools to build your own essential searchable model, that we really recommend people have a policy around that and think hard about what's happening and to do a bit of a survey internally. Who's using it? What versions are we using? What's out there? How is it being used? So that we or another company can come in and help build out tools that if the teams are clamoring for this new technology to be used, to give them a good way to use it, because they'll use it regardless.
Yeah, no, I think those are great points. I talk about like responsible AI literacy and usage all the time on this show. And I just think people, like you said, it's not that they're deliberately trying to do something nefarious or
Pace of change in the world of business is fast, and that drives incredible complexity for the world of human resources.
Welcome to the HR Data Lab's Brown Bag Lunch, a series of conversations with experts inside and outside the world of human resources on how to innovate, measure, and evolve our practices.
Our goal is to help provide you with practical examples of how HR has to change and to meet in this complex business environment.
Every week, we'll talk to new and different voices on all aspects of human resources.
And guess what? You get to chat with us live.
Live?
Live.
So they can answer questions or they can ask us questions.
They can ask, they can answer, whatever they want. They get to talk with us live.
That's awesome.
Sometimes we geek out on the data and technology that underlie the processes that drive the world of HR.
But the conversations are always insightful and fun. So please enjoy the HR Data Lab's Brown Bag Lunch.
they knowingly are doing something that might, inject risk into the organization. It's just for the expediency, the convenience, and maybe just not understanding how some of these tools work. I mean, I'll tell you that yesterday I discovered something that I didn't know about custom GPTs, right? Like, I wanted to know if whoever built the custom GPT, assuming I'm using someone else's, not mine. I wanted to know if they could see my interactions, maybe so that they could make their custom GPT better. And I'm using that generically. It doesn't have to be in ChatGPT. It could be, Claude or something else. But everything I read said, no, that the owners of that custom GPT cannot see your interaction. Your data is not used to train that model. It's just deployed for your use, and only you can see it. Well, the problem I encountered was I had another session open with the generic ChatGPT, And over the course of that conversation, it gave an example that I only entered into the custom GPT in another browser window. It maintained, it was able to basically, in its short-term memory, because I hadn't logged out and logged back in, it was able to see to pluck information from the conversation that I thought I was having in private with a custom GPT. And no, the session was persistent. I don't know if I'm explaining that exactly right. Basically, the context was available to it because I was still logged in under the same ID. So it wasn't exposed to anybody else, but I was taken aback. Like, please explain, before we talk about what I came to you to talk about, explain to me how you knew about that, because I only entered that in one place like 20 minutes ago. So I went through a whole thing where it was basically schooling me on the difference between, your privacy shielded from the owner of the custom GPT, where if it were someone else, versus, the persistent context and information shared across sessions. So I thought it was really interesting, and it was sort of eye-opening to me. I mean, the privacy thing isn't necessarily an exposure, but just from a personal experience perspective, I was quite taken aback.
No, I think that there will be things like that people are going to discover along the way as they're exploring without the right partnership or guidance or advisory to help them with that. And I'm really, one of the things I'm very proud of, that we have a really strong relationship with an InfoSec leader who has worked for a lot of Fortune 500 companies. And he's somebody that I worked with in my past that has his own independent company now. He's been one of our biggest referral points, which is so incredible for us to experience that, where he's helping lead some very large hotel companies. And when they're starting to explore this, he's saying, look, this is somebody you should be talking to because they can help you roadmap this in the right way. And we build on Microsoft Azure, and teams get their own workspace that is theirs. So we don't even use information from one hotel company to help train another. Their prompts belong to them. All of that data is theirs. And we do think that that's a big differentiator for us, that we can guarantee that security. It's one of the first things we're asked for, is to send that detail across on how we keep that secure and how this gets held. The first client that we signed was a publicly traded company, and that's international. And that's also a big help to us to be able to put that forward. And frankly, when I was thinking about joining this group and taking this leap, and one of the things that made me very excited, they started with a hedge fund that's SEC registered, and they started with law. And the fact that they can handle that securely in a way that's helped them, and they've grown tremendously on the law side, that gave me a lot of comfort. That even with the limited IT knowledge that I have, just enough to be dangerous, but that they knew that was going to be the biggest risk. Is this company secure? Can it be trusted? Is what we're doing something that's not going to put anyone's information at risk? Most importantly, the guest's information, and then the employee information, right? We're talking about human resources, and while hospitality, doesn't have a horrible consequence if things go wrong, maybe a bad stay, and we've all dealt with things like that before, pipes break, et cetera. But the HR side of things and taking care of employees and making sure that people's information is private and secure is really critical for us, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you have, the availability of these assistants in like, public, settings, lobbies of hotels or whatever, and maybe even in, guest rooms, right? I mean, there are, TVs and radios and devices within a room, not even your own personal device, where, technically we've already seen examples of where people can access services that way.
It's a very, very important part of what we do. I wanted to circle back, Bob. You talked about community, and you were using it in the context of how social media, when it first came out in that sense. And it's an interesting thing just to highlight one of the use cases that we're finding within these companies that we're working with. And there's been a big effort, obviously, when you're a large group that's growing, and hospitality is one of acquisition and merger, et cetera, to be able to have information that's accessible. And people talk about the difficulty of onboarding and what does someone need to know as they're first coming into the company. And one of the things that we're excited about is that we're building these tools that are a culmination of all the information that somebody could need that's pulled into this workspace. And then our ability to communicate through any channel is what's really exciting. So as we're building and pulling together these type tools that can be available for someone on a web chat, we also have it available through Teams information, Microsoft Teams, so that these employees and leaders can ask for information from this tool and get what they need. So we're taking decades old SharePoint files, culminating this all together, writing script of architecture, writing rules of what they should access first, and building out with the marketing teams, with HR teams, a tone of voice for those tools as well, so that really creating a way for people to access information that's consistent and multilingual. And so that somebody can come on board at an international company, whether they're in Costa Rica or working in Canada, and ask a question and get a consistent answer that's regionally accurate within state government laws that might be there for them, but give a consistent answer for them to go to first to find that info. And that could be anything from what restaurants are open. It's 10 p.m. and I'm working at a front desk at this property. Where do I find a celiac menu? Or how do I find my PTO policy? I have a question about taking temporary leave. All those things can be answered in one spot. And we're excited about the sense of community that drives as well. Although it's not the same as walking down the hall and speaking to human resources, and we think that always needs to be there. We love the idea of the consistency and constant availability of these kind of tools. And I think it does help drive community.
When I think about, you're going golfing, you're going skiing, there's a lot of not just policy related questions and sort of recommendations, like you said, around like restaurants or what have you. Some of it's, weather dependent. Some of it's, maybe parking. So how do you support like some of that, sort of real time information ingestion to make sure people get, there's a temporal nature to a lot of the questions you may get, I assume.
Again, it was one of the big questions that I asked of our CTO when we were first introduced and talking about the possibility of me joining and this being a viable tool in hospitality. I think it's important to understand that a lot of the tools that we talked about early on in this podcast, so we were speaking about the decision tree or giving a PDF, the difficulty in updating those and the burden that was on the property, the marketing team, the operators on having to update those and to structure the data in a way that the tool could digest it, that was a heavy lift. And so when I was looking at putting some of those things in place in my previous roles, that was a big deterrent for me. My team didn't have more time. That was quite the opposite, right? We're being pressured and limited staffing. And so we didn't have time to update things seasonally. And remember, I'm operating, at least for the last 15 years, in very seasonal environments. And so things change, right? The hours change, menus change, things shift constantly. And to your point, on a daily basis, sometimes you need to have those tools available. What blew me away when we went to look at how our architecture is built by Pablo, our CTO, and his VP, every agent has knowledge bases. Those knowledge bases can be made up of almost anything because we have the ability to ingest this unstructured data. And I can't tell you what a huge differentiator that is for us. And so a knowledge base can be a website, a knowledge base can be a weather app, a knowledge base can be any tool that you want it to be, even a handwritten PDF, because the work they did in law and having to bring in all the discovery, anything can be in a knowledge base and our tool can read that, digest it, and then the prompt helps tell you what to use, right? So if our prompt says, when someone asks about the weather, always go to this knowledge base and get the most recent version of a timestamp date and tell them as of this time, the weather forecast is as follows. And so you have, it's a very different tool than we were on a call earlier this week with one of the properties where we're actually engaged to put in a simple resort operator. This tool is going to answer the phone when you dial 0. It can transfer you anywhere. It can answer questions. It can make dining reservations. It can send towels to your room by triggering the system that alerts housekeeping, et cetera. But they were switching out a different system. They have an older system that's being removed. One of the questions the CTO asked was, should I send you this spreadsheet that we keep for the other system so you can tell us how we need to build your spreadsheet? And this was one where we're assigned from a corporate office standpoint to the property to help. And we said, no, that's the beauty. All we need is for marketing to keep their websites up to date or to have the F&B send us menus in a PDF and we give the instructions on where to go. You'll never need a spreadsheet again. You can certainly use that if there's something you want to have done in a spreadsheet. We can digest that too, but it's a really critical piece because you want it to be accurate, right? You want it to be tight. You want it to be consistent. And then that's where we're excited that we're able to do that. It makes a huge difference in the experience.
Yeah. My brain is spinning thinking of all the subpar, apps and experiences I've had. I'd love you guys to get plugged into everything. I mean, even back to your old employer, I was just on the My Epic app. Well, I'm checking it regularly before my trip, but I checked it last night, checked it today. I'm like, what do you mean there's 9 trails open, right? In Park City. Of 350 trails, there's 9 open. Is that accurate? Like, I'd love to just be able to have a conversation with our voice agent to just say, well, look, this is what we're expecting. We got weather coming in, and just sort of read me from Open Snow or one of those apps. Here's what we're looking at for the forecast. Definitely bring your gear because it's going to be, I don't know, just something to get me more excited, because at this point, like, I'm spending a lot of money to go out there, and I just don't know if I'm going to spend 3/4 of my day in line where there's going to be thousands of people all cramming into those 9 trails. Or maybe tell me by Monday there'll be 50 trails open, right? Like, tell me something. But I don't know. I just feel like there's situations like that where you could really alter the course of somebody's entire experience.
What you're really
Yeah.
diving into, Bob, and I think it's interesting. I think you're touching on the point of, you want to have a conversation, right? And that's exactly the point, right? That I think that's where this has morphed to. I think, again, over the last 8 to 10 months, where people want to have a conversation. They don't want to get just a flat answer back or have a link sent to them, and I think that's really with the core of what you're looking for. I did with Vail in particular. I think Rob is going to do an incredible job of advancing the technology there. I think he's very in tune with where things are heading and what the capabilities are of new technology. And I think that you'll see them move quickly into some really good solutions and full confidence in that group. They're incredible, and I think Rob's leadership will be great there. So I can't. Our tool can't make snow in Park City. I do think hopefully it's better when you get out there. Wish we could do that. We'd be having a different conversation, but I do think they're going to advance their tools. And I think, frankly, they were very early adopters into some efforts. They've had a lot of tools that they've tried to launch that I don't think technology was where they wanted it to be, just in general. And I think it is now. So I think you'll see that advance. But I think you want to have a conversation. You're saying you'd love to be able to pick up the phone and ask the question about, what does it really look like there? What's the weather pattern coming in? And I think that's a fun thing to look at as a use case of how you can help with that, to let people know what their experience will be like.
Yeah, and there's plenty of people that do their homework, right? When they're either planning a trip, or they want to get a second, third opinion or whatever. But it's still, I mean, that's the advantage of some of these AI tools, right? It's already sort of aggregating the sort of insight. It's doing research on your behalf, and it's pulling it together. I think, to your point, there's something about having a conversation. Like, I don't need to see your face. I wouldn't see your face anyway if I was having a web-based chat or whatever. So I'm indifferent. I'd rather have you give me accurate answers than worry about whether or not this answer is coming from a specific human being. In fact, probably better to have the AI give you that answer, because it's gathering information from trusted sources, as opposed to just calling customer service and you're at the whim of whatever 18-year-old is working the desk that day, and be like, oh, it's going to be a bluebird day, and da, da, da. It's like, what? Okay, but you call back 5 minutes later and you get somebody else saying, I don't know, it's not looking good.
The consistency is really, really key, Bob. It's one of the things that we love about the process, is that if we're working with reservations or we're working with in-room dining, we work directly with the subject matter expert who leads that area, right? So as we're building out the prompt side of this tool, we'll talk directly to someone who, and some of the properties we're working with have very difficult sales processes. Some of these have golf courses that you cannot play unless you're staying at the property X amount of days. And there's some people who are really good at explaining that. There's some that are not. And so depending on when you call in, you can have a very frustrating experience at not understanding why you can't do one before the other, or activities that can't be booked until your room is booked at certain resorts. So as we work through that, we work with the person who that team tells us is the best at selling it. And if it's Janet in reservations that just crushes it and always gets great scores, and she's the one who trains everybody, she's the one who helps us write the prompt. And not to replace Janet or replace teams, but to put incredible support that can be multilingual now, that can be in any language and can be covering the phones from 7 at night when no one's usually there until 6 in the morning, or handle overflow. But it's a good experience. And the other area where I go to quite a bit to like highlight the difference is that if we think about in-room dining and what in-room dining used to be in 1998, working at the Four Seasons in Santa Barbara, 2 people overnight working in-room dining that would cover those phones just in case at our 200-room hotel we had 2 calls at once. We couldn't have that happen. So we had to have 2 people there. And they were perfect. They were well-trained. They were amazing. And in-room dining at night, overnight was incredible there, just as it was at every Four Seasons. That's changed in our business. Our industry, the margins are so tight. You don't see that anymore. And so the ability to have a tool that can answer a call at, it might be 10:30, it might be 12:30, it might be 2:30. And if you want to order something and you have dietary restrictions and you have really specific questions, or if you want a great glass of wine because you just got off an international flight and you want to have a steak with a really nice glass of wine, that's why you stayed at a 5-star property, it'll have the same knowledge as your sommelier. Everything that was built in can be there. It can know everything about the wine by the glass, the history of the winery, anything you want it to know. And it goes deep as you want it to go in any language. And that's great. That's wonderful. My son is celiac. And when I call somewhere, we're trying to order room service and I need to know the safety side of it. He's not gluten intolerant. He's celiac. He has an allergy and we need to know. And if I want to know the right answer that's been trained versus somebody who might pick up the phone that's not well trained on it, can give me, say, I guess this is it, or we have French fries, but we don't know if it's dedicated fryer. Those are really important questions. Now you have to follow through on, if that's your policy, you have to make sure that the human's cooking and delivering or executing it the right way. But people, I think, like that consistency. And I think people are finding more and more that their experiences, again, in their personal life as they're calling to make a dental appointment or booking car service or interacting more and more with this and finding it to be pretty efficient.
Well, that's really impressive, the work that you've done. And obviously I love that these things are responsibly designed. You've got your security, cyber experts, you've got your privacy, concerns, checked off, and you've got, real experts, training these systems. And I just think that especially with the hospitality background that you have, I mean, the ability to take what was already probably a very sort of personalized experience for these guests and sort of bring it into, I guess complement it with this, modern, technology, gives you the sort of scalability that I think a lot of companies.
What if being a leader worth following means being human, imperfect, and open to learning? This is Kate Johnson, owner of 123 Limited, and I want to invite you to discover how to care for, support, and even love the people you lead. Join me every Tuesday for the Well-Led podcast.
Would see immediate value in. I mean, you're just elevating the experience for everybody.
I think we are. I think it's fun. You commented on the experts. I think yes, I have expertise in lodging and hospitality, and it's fun to be able to build these, but the experts who really build these tools are the people that we talk to who work at the properties or work within the corporate teams. And it's really fun to watch them go through the process and use their standard operating procedures as a knowledge base and plug in the Forbes 5-star standards into these tools. And it's pretty remarkable. And with the small changes they want to make and tweak, there's times where we'll get a question of, oh boy, could you have it say this less or this more? And sorry to bother you. It probably means a lot of reprogramming. It's simply typing it into the prompt, right? And our tool saves versions of the prompt, so we can always go back. So before we launch, we'll have 100 versions of one prompt that we can always go back to. But I'll give you an example. Of those that have worked with me in the past that might be listening, my word that I've been known for is absolutely. It's my favorite word. It's what I want everybody to respond with when someone asks a question, even if it's absolutely, but that room will be an extra $1,000 a night. It can always be needs to be an affirmative response, to the point where even when I married my wife, instead of saying I do, she said absolutely, and half the crowd laughed, half was confused.
Nice.
It's been my thing. And we were training an agent for a property in Napa as a demo, and I had our VP of customer success. I said, I want to really layer in absolutely. I've worked with this team before, and they'll get it. And I was doing a test call yesterday, and it said absolutely, I think 15 times in one room service order. And I sent him a note and said, okay, remove it. We're way too far down. It has to have an attitude of absolutely, but you can't do it that often. So it'll do what you tell it. You have to be careful what you tell it to do.
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's just part of being thorough and responsible in terms of those evaluations of each solution, right?
Something interesting too that I think you're going to see start to happen more and more with these interactions as people understand how these tools work. When I'm demoing for someone and we're going through perhaps a room service order and it's maybe being flowery and now it's responding saying that sounds like a wonderful dish. And you can say to the tool as the guest, speed up. I'm in a little bit of a hurry, and it will. Or you can say, slow down, you're speaking too quickly for me, and it will. And if you change languages in the middle of it, it'll change languages. And it's responsive in a way that it's interesting. I don't think people realize that when they're calling in. I encourage folks to, if you're talking to an agent and booking your next dental appointment, ask it to speed up or slow down and see what happens. Some of these tools are very responsive in that way. And I think that's a really interesting nuance. If you think about various guests that are traveling and they want that kind of interaction, it's fun. So meaning we get to train it and see how responsive it is and get feedback, and we can always make those adjustments on the back end. But even in the moment, a guest gets a chance to tailor their own experience with it, which I think is really interesting.
Right. Just in terms of how these conversations are initiated, I mean, the guests know they're not talking to a human being, right? I mean, you're transparent about that.
It's really interesting. That's a question that comes up quite a bit, Bob. I always say that it's really up to our clients that we're building this for.
Okay.
My default, if I'm running a luxury property or any property or a reservation office, that I would want this tool to have a name, and it's up to the guest up to the client to name the tool and decide if it's a male or a female voice and what personality they want it to have. But I do think that if you think about the capabilities for a guest to know, if it says, hi, I'm SAVI and I'm a reservation agent that can answer any questions for you and can book rooms for you, and I speak any language, so feel free to speak to me in any language you're most comfortable. And at any point, if you'd like to be transferred to a human, just let me know and I'll transfer you there. And so our tools, you can say, transfer me to a human, and it'll go straight to wherever you want it to go. And it could transfer to phone numbers, extensions, et cetera. I think that's important, but I think it'll be interesting as we continue to grow. We may have some clients that don't feel they need to have that lengthy of an intro and they don't need that detail. But I do see a world where we're working with a client in the mountains that has a very strong Brazilian clientele that comes in during a particular month in the winter. And they're very keen on being able to let that group know that they have tools that can speak Portuguese when they dial 0 and can help them with anything. So they're actually talking about having a specific card they can give to their clients that are coming in to let them know that when they dial 0, they can speak Portuguese. So how people choose to let people know what the capabilities of the tool are and how they identify it, it's really up to our clients. And I think everyone's defaulting towards giving people some knowledge that it's there, not trying to disguise it at this point.
Yeah. No, hopefully not. Not that this is these are necessarily high, risk. You're not confiding in this agent. It's there for a specific purpose. But, I would say when it tells you it can answer any question in any language, it's probably a clue that this is either a superhuman or just not human at all.
Yeah, you probably don't have to reiterate the two. That's a good point.
Yeah, no, I think I'm just so optimistic about where things are going, just, talking to you about, these use cases. And then, as I was alluding to before, the next generation of the Alexas. I'm not sure what's happening with Siri. I kind of gave up on Siri a while ago, but we'll see what happens in the future. But yeah, I just think to be able to navigate, to gather context, to not have to install. I mean, I don't know if you have to do this anymore with Alexa, but you used to have to actually install skills and recipes so that it would be able to answer more domain specific questions or play games and stuff like that. And so it just seems like we're moving to much more sort of open-ended, context aware and personalized experiences with all of these.
It does. Yeah, it certainly feels that way. And I think that the operations teams and the executives that we're talking to, they're feeling that as well. The sentiment that you just shared is something we hear constantly. And it's one of the key things that I'd like to highlight is that as we were talking with one executive in Chicago, and he was saying that he wants to have an AI roadmap in place so that he can, of course, for his executive team and of course for his investors, and his partners. They're management companies. They've got owners that are out there. But he said that more importantly, it's for his staff. That when he hosts a town hall or when he travels to his properties, it's become one of the key questions that people are asking him. What's our policy on AI? What's our plan with AI? How are we going to grow there? And it's not coming from a fear standpoint of what's going to happen to my job when AI comes. It's that when can I start using these tools to be more efficient and better and have something in place that can really help us? And when will the phone stop ringing at the front desk for a room service order because we don't have that position in the month of May? And so I think the curiosity, the awareness, the excitement about it is there. I think there's less of a fear factor. I think the obvious larger existential questions about artificial intelligence and how that grows and impacts the world and are obviously out there. And then, we're trying to solve some pretty simple problems here and add some solutions and not thinking about that larger existential piece of it all. But I'm really thrilled within the last 6 months where things have shifted to, at least in our industry and the industry adjacent. People are very excited about having something in place that can help the guests and help the employees as well.
So what's next for SAVI? What can you share about your own roadmap?
Yeah, our roadmap, we're building for clients, and I think that what we're seeing right now, the obvious things are voice. We're very good at voice. We're seeing that take off for us, whether that's simply doing room service. We've had some clients that we'd like to. Everyone uses the same term. They want to crawl, walk, run, and they get pretty quick to walk and run once we start crawling. But the basics of the resort operator, or PBX as it's called in the industry, of having something available that can handle those calls, as we said, can transfer calls and answer questions. And we're seeing that adopt very quickly. We're seeing the room service side start to take off as well. That's a piece that, even for just overnight, it doesn't have to be always, but if it can handle overnight or when there's 2 calls at once. Golf has been a big growth area for us that I think we're going to continue to invest into and improve our tools. And the golf industry is one where most of those calls, if they're not booked online, are coming to the front desk of the golf course, where golf pros and guest service agents are handling those while they're checking in guests as well. And we find that as a big relief point. So we're excited about the traction there. And then the AI advisory has really led us to discover a multitude of use cases that some of which we'd never even considered. And due to the size of the companies and the diversity of the companies that we're working with, we're excited about some of those tools. And frankly, some of the things we're creating as part of that AI advisory are going to become really offerings that we're sending out as products to offer. Doing some bank reconciliation work for companies. We're doing some capital approval process automation that is saving a tremendous amount of time for one company once we're done building that agent, that I think would help a lot of larger companies that have some complicated and antiquated ways of approving things that go from PDF to channel to DocuSign to through, that can really be faster, more efficient and cataloged. And then I think the HR side, I think that's where we're going to continue to see some real traction. That the international teams that come to join us that speak various languages, that work in this industry, it's a huge part of the hospitality industry. It's been one of my favorite parts of the industry, frankly, especially working in the mountains, of every winter having thousands of students that are excited to be in the mountains from various countries. And that cultural pop you get from that is so exciting. Being able to provide some incredible tools that help support in a multilingual way, especially as companies have continued to see some offshoring and centralization of human resources. We think there's big traction there. But as far as what's next, I have to tell you, every week these tools improve, not because of what we're doing, but because the back end models of these things get better and better. They get less expensive. It's really crazy how fast this is working and how much more is available to us as things improve around us. But that's what's nice about what we're doing. We have a proprietary tech that is the architecture of how our agents are built that makes them really special. But we're built on Microsoft Azure. We leverage OpenAI for our tools on the back end. And so we improve as they improve. We don't have a static product. And I think that's what's really exciting for our clients. They're not going to put something in that they're buying that's a box tool that answers the phone that 6 months later is going to be totally obsolete because things have improved and they're not tied into that improvement.
Yeah, I think there's so much opportunity for you guys. We spoke the other day about some of the use cases that I was thinking about, just where some of the data is so diverse and dispersed, in terms of the disparate sources that you would have to track down, or the complexity of, ordering specific, products where there's like enormous, catalogs that would take someone an inordinate amount of time to sift through. And then even just the complexity, stretching hospitality to just, travel planning, whether you're going on a, European, tour for a couple of months, taking a sabbatical, or, bourbon trail, tours. I know you worked at Jack Winery for a while, and I've actually had some of their barrel picks of whiskey. I don't know. There's just a lot of things that I think about. We'll have to have another conversation where we can run through some of those.
We will. We do think that there are some things that we think we can really be impactful with from a travel planning standpoint. And we've been very focused on this initial launch of the tools that help support the operation. But we've had some really fun ideation with our leadership group about the vacation rental space and the ability to help filter that in a much tighter way, and which is a huge opportunity. It's a nightmare trying to find as you know, you're traveling with a lot of people to Park City. I'm sure finding that perfect residence wasn't as easy as it could or should be. We have a lot of thoughts around that. We're working on a product for it. But
we needed 3 places for this trip. This is a whole nother story. Yeah. But one of those places is my brother's, who wants to put his place. He recently bought a place, Kimball Junction, and he wants to put it up, let someone else sort of manage it for him. And, but just putting it up Airbnb and whatever, like, people are going to have questions about that. His daughter, my niece, built an app for kids that are traveling abroad for the semester called Nomad. And so people, sharing, oh, you should go here, you should go here. I mean, that's like almost ready-made for some kind of voice AI, interaction to help guide that complex, extended travel itinerary. So
it is, the other side of it, both on the vacation rental side and on the hospitality side, that, the agentic search that it's happening now with people going to these large language models to ask questions about lodging, and are you discoverable on there? So it's really the new SEO, and we actually have a partner who has created something pretty incredible that we're in the process of working with now to see how we can help advance the AI side of what he's working on, but to see how that can actually land as a product that we could bring to the industry that can help people be discoverable, because we think we're already hearing stories of, Google traffic dropping drastically for some of these properties, and website traffic dropping as people are searching in other ways to find out about their property.
Yeah. No, sky's the limit.
Sky's the limit. I will tell you, it's a lot of fun. I having been in the business of taking care of people for so long, and working with these companies that are so focused around the holiday time, it's really interesting right now for me to be in a space where we're busy, but I still feel very connected to the industry. I still feel like I'm scratching that itch of taking great care of people by designing these tools. But it's been a lot of fun. I'm using a part of my brain that I don't know that I ever thought I would truly use in this way, but it's been a blast. I really, really enjoy it. And I'm so glad that I'm able to connect with so many people in the lodging industry in so many different ways right now. And we're excited for this next year. We think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, awesome. I'm excited for you. And congrats on all the progress thus far. It sounds great.
Great. Well, wonderful. Thank you so much. And I'm excited to hear how your trip to Park City goes. And if you need anything, give me a call. I'm happy to help any way that I can. So I have a few friends out there, but I'm sure it'll be a great experience. And I hope you really enjoy yourself.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it. Yeah, no, it'll be great to see the family, and we'll make the best of it, whatever we wind up doing. So Lance, thank you so much again for spending some time with me. It was great to hear about all the great work you're doing.
Great. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you next time.